Hola, hi everyone. We have a couple more folks joining us in a second. This around here. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's very nice to have you all here. I'll begin in a second. Hola, buenas tardes a todos que se han reunido hoy conmigo. Les quiero dejar saber que esta presentación, los costos de la universidad o la educación superior va a estar en inglés. So, si estaban esperando una presentación en español, les pido mis disculpas, pero siempre será posible tener una reunión conmigo uno a uno si les gustaría tener esa información en español. Pero para los propósitos para esta noche, la presentación será en inglés. Podré tomar preguntas en español si durante la presentación o al final de la presentación tiene algunas preguntas o inquietudes. Like I was saying in Spanish, this presentation will be in English. If you were hoping for a Spanish presentation, I do apologize, but for the purposes of today, the presentation will be done in English. If you have any questions or concerns and you feel comfortable utilizing Spanish over English, please feel free to drop those in the chat or save them to the very end of the presentation. But thank you so much for joining me for today. So the presentation today is brought to you by Hope. We are a local nonprofit here in the state of Georgia, and we have the pleasure of working with students in Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, and California, all the way on the West Coast. Today's presentation is done in collaboration with the Consulate of Mexico here in Atlanta through our work together in la Ventanilla de Orientación Educativa, which is our educational resource center. Tonight's presentation, The Cost of Higher Education, is very broadly a financial aid webinar with two purposes specifically. One, in helping you understand the cost of higher education and what exactly we're talking about when we're talking about the cost of a public or private college, of a 2-year or a 4-year institution. And then lastly, what are we talking about when we're talking about financial aid and helping you all pay for the cost of higher education. So let's see here. So like I mentioned, this presentation will be broken up into two sections. It'll be actually a lengthy presentation, so there will be some parts where I won't go into as much depth in order to respect all of your time. But if you have any questions or concerns about anything that I mentioned in passing that you'd just like to know more about, don't hesitate to drop a comment in the chat or even just raise your hand or unmute yourself at the very end of the presentation. I know we have a classroom of students watching, likely at Kahala Creek. If you all have questions, I know it's quite a few of you, please feel free to drop them in the chat. You can do that privately or just let me know after the event if you have any questions or concerns that are specific to one of your students. Okay. So section 1 of today is kind of understanding the cost of higher education and how the costs vary depending on the college or university that you want to go to, the type of degree that you're trying to pursue after high school. At this point, this is our third program of the semester, the first one being El Camino a la Universidad, the roadway to college, which was a Spanish presentation done in August. And then we had a Noche de Padres done early September. So by this point, hopefully you've been able to join us at those other two programs and learn about the different types of colleges and what it takes to apply to a college or university. But if you haven't, please feel free to let me know at the very end of tonight's presentation. I can still answer some general questions about that, even though it's not related to financial aid. Okay, so in order for all of us to come into this presentation with the same and general base of knowledge, there are a couple of terms that I want to explain to everyone. The first one being tuition. Tuition specifically refers to the money that you're charged to pay for the cost of classes every semester and every year that you're pursuing a particular degree. So this could be that you're paying for tuition fall semester, spring semester, or you're doing your calculations for your first year, second year, even third or fourth year of college. But tuition specifically refers to the cost of classes. So the cost that it takes for a university to provide you the courses that you need for a particular degree or academic program. The second set of terms is room and board. These are two terms that I'm clumping together, but room and board typically refers to the cost of you living on campus. And this refers to specifically your dorming situation if you choose to live in a residence hall or an apartment that's controlled by the college. And it would include the cost of your meal plans if you decide to partake in their cafeterias and dining services. Both of these, tuition, room, and board, are pieces of the overall total cost of attendance, which is the third term. The total cost of attendance, to keep it simple, it's your total budget for a specific semester or a first, or second, or first, second, third, or fourth year of college. So it would include tuition, any fees that they might assign to you, and these are typically clumped under like student fees. That could be for using the library, laboratory, using the gym, fees for technology and printing, minor costs that, depending on the institution, could add up to just $200 or a couple $100. But with your tuition fees, room and board, allowances for books and supplies, so what they estimate you might spend on textbooks and printing out materials for class, what they might expect you to spend on transportation, commuting to and from your dorm to the campus, from your home to the campus, and then even sometimes they'll calculate into the total cost of attendance an estimated amount of personal expenses that you might just have by being a college student. The total cost of attendance, tuition, room and board, those are the three main things that change from one college campus to the next. And it all is impacted by the cost that an institution has to be able to provide you the services that they do, but also the cost of living in and around that community. Something that impacts the total cost of attendance and how much you're paying in tuition is something called residency determination. This is a process that states have, and each state has its own set of rules and ways of doing determining residency for a student, but it specifically refers to the process in which a college or university determines if they can consider you a resident of the state for the purposes of tuition and financial aid. So this impacts how much they charge you and how much they're able to offer you in financial assistance through state-based aid programs. And through this residency determination, we then enter tuition classification. This is where they consider you an in-state or out-of-state student. This is where they may also categorize you as an international student, depending on your immigration status. And across those three classifications or categories, the prices will be a little bit different. The forms of scholarships or grants that you might be able to get will be a little bit different. It all depends on the college. Everything that's impacted by tuition classification can typically be referred to as like financial aid. Financial aid being a catch-all or umbrella term that refers to all the forms of financial assistance that you might receive to help pay or cover the cost of your college or university education. And specifically, that can, most of the time, that refers to scholarships or grants. Scholarships being a form of financial assistance that you do not have to pay back, and that they're typically offered to students on the basis of a particular characteristic. So this could be the fact that it's an academic scholarship because of your grades in high school. It could be an academic scholarship because of the major that you're trying to have or the career that you're pursuing through a college program. It could be a scholarship because you did a lot of community service or you're still actively participating in community service. This could be a scholarship because of your athletic skills in high school and you still continuing as an athlete at a college or university level and things like that. And then grants, they're similar to scholarships in that you typically do not have to pay them back, but they tend to be based on financial necessity. But there's an exception to that. Sometimes colleges use both the language of scholarships and grants a little bit interchangeably, so they just switch them up. And grants could also follow the same structure as scholarships, and they could be given to you because of your academic performance, athletic skill, based on financial necessity, community service, or they're just one-time financial aid awards that they offer you because they have extra funds. So knowing those terms hopefully will help make the rest of this presentation a little bit more bearable and easier for you to understand, especially as I go through the next couple of sections a little bit quickly. Broadly, like I mentioned in the title of this program, right, we're talking about how to cover the cost of higher education or post-secondary education, which is whatever educational program you participate in after high school. This could be attending a college, a university, a vocational training program, technical or trade schools, licensing and certification programs, or adult continuing education programs, right? So a lot of these financial aid topics that I'll cover in the second half of today's presentation will be relevant to everything that's not a college or university education. So it could apply to trade schools, it could apply to licensing and certification programs and continuing education programs, as long as they're eligible to receive federal or state-based financial aid opportunities or accept outside scholarships to help cover the cost of those programs. But for the purposes of today, instead of focusing on all the different post-secondary education options, we'll focus in on colleges and universities, specifically on typical categories of public and private colleges and universities, and the difference between 2-year and 4-year institutions, whether you're getting a diploma and associate's degree, or whether you're pursuing your bachelor's of arts or bachelor's of science. To simplify the complex systems of colleges here in the United States, right, there are a couple of things that are good to know, and that it's that public colleges are typically government funded, which means that in comparison to them, private institutions typically rely on the revenue that they get from y'all paying tuition or private donors and endowments. So both public and private universities, they receive their funding from a variety of different places. Private institutions can also receive government funding, but it's important to recognize that most private institutions are able to receive additional funding outside of that, which gives them the leeway or discretion to give you larger financial aid award packages because they have more money at their disposal, versus public colleges and universities. Typically, the money that they're awarding you is coming from state-based or federal aid programs and the couple of scholarships that they're able to fund and maintain through their revenue. While tuition and the total cost of attendance can be significantly higher at a private institution, and in a second, I'll show you all an example of the cost of a private college in comparison to a public college. Like I mentioned, they can typically award you larger financial aid packages, which means that even though at a first glance, right, just looking at their website, it seems that the cost will be significantly higher in comparison to your local state university. But after receiving financial aid packages, it is possible for you to pay a lot less out of pocket at a private institution than in comparison to a public institution, but it all depends on how your financial aid package is built. Whether you were eligible for federal, state-based aid, whether you were eligible for university scholarships, or whether or not you applied to scholarships outside of the college or university and things like that. Ultimately, one of the things that really helps distinguish between public and private institutions is that public institutions tend to be able to offer you a larger variety of different academic programs for a lesser sticker price, which means that it seems less expensive at just the first glance, right? Versus private institutions tend to be smaller and tend to be able to offer you a limited amount of academic programs, but they might offset that by helping making it easier for you to pay a lot less going to college. But it's important to know that regardless of what college or university you're looking at, it's important to keep your options open and explore colleges and universities that offer what aligns with your personal, academic, and professional interests, but also colleges that are affordable to you and will make attending college or university after high school, whether that's immediately after high school, a year or two after high school, a financially sound decision for yourself, right? I always encourage students to choose the college or university that best fits them and their financial situation. That way you can walk away from your college degree, whether that's a 2-year or 4-year degree, with little to no debt, right? Versus taking out a lot of loans, and then by the time that you graduate, the amount of loans that you have outweighs how much you're actually earning in your first year or second year salary as a full-time employee after college. To simplify the cost, in the next couple of slides, I'll be showing you different examples so that you can kind of better conceptualize all these different terms. But one of the things that you should really know to help simplify it all is that your student invoice, so when you've applied to a college or university, have been accepted, have received your financial aid package that tells you how much scholarships or grants they'll be able to give you, right? You'll still get a bill before the start of fall semester that will let you know if there's something that you have to pay, right? If there's a remaining balance, or if there's actually an excess in financial aid, and they'll be cutting you a check for a couple $100s of extra money that they were able to award you and was just left over, right? Not every student is fortunate enough to be cut a check at the end of every semester, which is like, here's an extra $200 that was additional scholarships or grants that we just didn't need to apply to your student account. But when you're looking at this invoice, it's a bill. It looks very formal. If you don't really manage household bills, it might seem a little bit daunting or confusing, but it's typically broken up into a couple of different sections. For your first year, it might include the deposit. So typically after you apply to a college, you receive an offer of admissions, there is a specific date that you have to confirm with the college or university that you are committing to their institution. And typically for a lot of these colleges, that includes a deposit. This could be a deposit of $100 up until $500. It really depends on the college or university, but they tend to give you more than enough time to prepare for that deposit. And typically in your first invoice, they'll show that you've paid a deposit already, right? It's not something that they're charging you again. But on the invoice, they'll show you the tuition. So how much you're paying for the cost of your classes. They'll show you the cost of dorming on their campus if you're choosing to live on their campus. Some institutions will require all freshmen or first year students to dorm on their campus for the first year. A good example of this is the University of Georgia. Other colleges and universities leave it completely up to you to decide if you want to live on campus or if you want to commute from home to campus if it is close enough and feasible for you. If you decide to be a commuter student to your particular college or university, then you're not paying room, you're not paying for your dorm, and you might not even be paying for board, which typically refers to your meal plans. Sometimes students will pay for meal plans if they know they'll be there every single day of the week, but at the end of the day, it'll be optional for you as well. Certain students might be required to pay for health insurance. This is typically limited to international students. It's very rare for a college or university to require you to pay for it if you are not an international student yourself. And then lastly, there typically tend to be student activities or resource fees. This refers to what I mentioned a bit earlier. These could be small costs for using the library, for using their printers, for using technology, for maintenance and things like that. And then if you have a car and you commute or you live on campus and keep your car on campus, you might pay for a parking pass. And then lastly, depending on the classes that you have in a given semester, they might charge you for textbooks if you put books charges on your account. But typically the textbooks and materials, those kind of costs aren't on your invoice because you pay for those out of pocket yourself, either via Amazon, the campus bookstore, or other places like that. So when we're referring to tuition, there's something really important for you to know is that depending on the state that you live in and their process for determining if you are considered a resident of the state, you could end up being classified as an in-state or out-of-state student, which is the same as a resident or non-resident student of a state. And a lot of the times students get this confused, especially if you are from an immigrant family or an immigrant yourself. When we're referring to if you are a resident of the state, that has little to nothing to do with whether or not you're a legal permanent resident and whether that's your immigration status, but it just has to do with whether or not you living in the state and having established residency and your immigration status complies with their policies on if you are a resident or not. So for example, we'll have students here in Georgia who are undocumented or they're documented students who have lived in Georgia all 16, 18 years of their lives and are graduating from a Georgia high school. But even though they have an established residency in the state of Georgia and they have a physical address and that they can prove that they lived in the state for more than a year before graduating from high school, for the purposes of tuition and financial aid at the state level, Georgia policies would dictate that a college or university has to classify them as an out-of-state student. Versus if you were a US citizen, legal permanent resident, as long as you had been in Georgia for over a year before graduating from high school or starting your first semester of college, you would be classified as an in-state student. And this impacts how much you have to pay for tuition or the cost of classes and how much someone's able to offer you in financial aid. Every state is a bit different, but for the most part, in Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, undocumented students and students of other immigrant experiences would be classified as out-of-state students. Okay, that was a lot. But now to kind of make it a little bit easier to understand by showing you real world examples, I have the next couple of slides is comparing colleges and universities that a lot of our students here at Hope actually apply to and enroll in. So to start us off, I'm using the University of Georgia or UGA as an example to show you the difference between an in-state or resident tuition rate and that of an out-of-state or non-resident tuition rate. So you can better understand how, if you are coming from out of state, or if you're an immigrant student classified as an out-of-state student or non-resident student, you can better understand what kind of costs you should expect when you are applying to a particular college or university. With the end goal, right, that knowing a lot better what we're referring to by the total cost of attendance, you can make better decisions about what colleges and universities you research, consider applying to, end up applying to, and then ultimately accept to enroll into. But here at the University of Georgia, right, if you're looking on the left-hand side, when we're looking at in-state tuition or in-state or resident student, their tuition and fees, so the cost of classes and the random fees that they might charge you for the library, printing, etc., totals up to $12,080 for the academic year, right? So this cost would be split across 2 semesters, and part of that cost could be covered by the Hope or Zell Miller Scholarship if you're in state, or other federal aid opportunities, and be dispersed across both semesters, so you're paying a lot less. UGA is an example of one of those schools that requires their freshman or first-year students to live on campus their first year. So in this case, you would have to pay the fees for the residence hall, which could total up to $6,416 for the year. And since you're living on campus, you might also end up paying the 7-day meal plan, which would be an additional $4,000. And then the estimated book, supplies, and living expenses of $5,426. Like it's written there, it's an estimated amount, right? You could end up spending up to that number, less than that number, or even more than that estimate, depending on your personal expenses when it comes to books, supplies, and your living arrangements. But the expected total cost of attendance for an in-state student, right, regardless of whether or not they physically live in-state, would be about $27,000, right? For students who physically are coming from out of state, so if they're coming, let's use a random example, if they're coming from Texas, right? Or if they're an immigrant student who isn't classified as a in-state or resident student, they would be paying the same price of about $31,000 for tuition and fees. So this is what they'd be charged for the classes that they're enrolled in. You'd be charged similar prices for residence hall, the meal plan, and you'd have similar estimated expenses when it comes to your books, supplies, and anything that you need for your personal living arrangements. But that tuition difference really makes a big difference when you're talking about the total cost of attendance. So $27,000 versus $47,000, all depending on whether or not you're classified as an in-state student or an out-of-state student, right? And this is all just at one institution. So this is all at the same college. Most public colleges and universities do make that differentiation of in-state, out-of-state, and international. When it comes to private universities, they tend to not have a different tuition rate for in-state and out-of-state or international students. All students tend to pay the same amount. And I'll show you all an example in a second. But one of the things that's really important to know, right, that as you're building your list of colleges that you are thinking of applying to, even if you're looking at all the same, are all public institutions, which are all public colleges or state universities, the cost of attendance could be different at every single one of them, right? Even though they're all in Georgia, they all have different costs associated to them. Here, we're comparing the in-state or resident tuition rate and total cost of attendance for UGA versus Georgia State University. You're going to notice in a second that Georgia State University has a lot more numbers, and I'll explain in a second why. For UGA, same total that we just discussed of $27,000, right, and a little bit more. And that would cover tuition, your fees, you living on campus, having a meal plan, and an estimated amount of money that you might spend on books, supplies, and on things that you need for your living arrangements. Reminder, right, that at UGA, living on campus your first year is required. At Georgia State, it's not. So at Georgia State, you have the option of being a commuter student and traveling from wherever you live to campus, right? So students, if you live in Metro Atlanta, commuting could be the more affordable and ideal option. If you live beyond Metro Atlanta, maybe living on campus would be the better situation for you. But here, let's say we did compare two students who did live on campus, right? So comparing a on-campus student at UGA and an on-campus student at Georgia State, the total cost of attendance at Georgia State, if you choose to live on campus, would be $26,000 and a little bit more, right? So about 27, which is comparable to what it's costing a student who's required to live on campus at UGA, right? So the total amounts are similar. Tuition is a bit more expensive at UGA than it is at Georgia State, but it ends up kind of evening out in a bit because the student is paying a bit more in housing, a little bit less in the meal plan, right? And they're paying for parking. In this example, I didn't calculate how much it would cost for a student to park at UGA. But let's say you're choosing to be a commuter student at Georgia State University, and you're choosing to travel from home to campus because that's easy, it's simpler for you. Maybe you have access to a car and can drive, or hopping onto public transportation isn't a concern to you. Your total cost of attendance could just end up being $14,000 an academic year, right? And that would simply be for tuition, books and supplies, possible personal expenses that you'll have, and student fees, right? This isn't accounting for housing because you're not living on campus. This isn't accounting for a meal plan because it would be optional for you. And this may or may not account for transportation and parking. Okay. And then let's say we move on to the next example, right? And this time we're actually comparing a public university with a private university. Assuming, right, that the public university is going to be less expensive, the private institution might be more expensive. And when comparing Georgia State University to Emory University, it pans out, right? Georgia State University ends up being significantly less than what it would cost to attend Emory University. So tuition at Georgia State is about $8,948. Tuition at Emory University is about $57,120, right? Student fees, a little bit different, a little bit more expensive at Georgia State than it is at Emory. Housing is more expensive at Emory than it would be at Georgia State, even though it's still in Metro Atlanta, right? The meal plans are also more expensive at Emory than they are at Georgia State, and things like that, right? But like I was mentioning, right, depending on your financial aid package, attending Emory University could actually end up being cheaper than it would be to attend Georgia State University. Emory University, for example, is one of the few institutions in the state of Georgia who commits to meeting 100% need or demonstrated need of and for undocumented students. So if you're an undocumented student whose academic profile, which specifically referring to your GPA, your SAT, ACT scores, the quality of your essays, aligns with what Emory University is expecting out of potential applicants, then you could receive a full tuition scholarship, right? A full ride at Emory University and get a significant amount of that total cost of attendance completely covered because Emory has made a commitment to cover 100% of demonstrated need for undocumented students. There are also other ways to go to Emory University. So instead of just applying to the traditional route, you could apply to QuestBridge, right? QuestBridge is a full ride scholarship for high achieving low or limited income students. And that scholarship itself might be closing within the next week. But for future students who are still not seniors, or for students who are taking a gap year, if you take a gap year, you can still apply the QuestBridge next fall, as long as you haven't already enrolled in a college. And one of those institutions that you could eventually match with could be Emory University. And then for undocumented students, another opportunity that could also take you to Emory would be the Golden Doors Scholarship, which would close mid to late October, I think on October 26th. And for undocumented students, this could mean that you get a full tuition scholarship and you get all of tuition covered, right? And you can choose to be a commuter student or choose to live on campus if you're able to receive other financial aid opportunities or scholarships that cover the other costs associated with attending Emory. Now, that was a very drastic example, right? Low cost or mid cost public institution versus a very expensive private college. But these costs can even be seen when we're comparing 4-year and 2-year colleges and universities. So when comparing a public university like Georgia State University with a technical college here in Georgia, right? So at Georgia State University, if you choose to commute, right, you're saving yourself the cost of housing, of the meal plan, and things like that. If you choose to live on campus, you're adding an additional amount. But ultimately, the total cost of attendance at Georgia State, depending on if you live on campus or commute, could be somewhere between $14,000 or $26,000, right? versus at a 2-year college, like Gwinnett Technical College, you could be paying about $4,772 if you are considered and classified as an in-state or resident student, right? And the difference between 2-year and 4-year colleges really comes down to what you're choosing to study. Technical colleges tend to offer you certificate, diploma, and associate degree programs where as you're like enrolled in your courses, right, you have hands-on experience and a little bit of a higher likelihood to get job placement because you are receiving work experience through your courses. These could be programs that prepare you to become like a medical assistant, a radiology tech, a dental hygienist, and things like that. Versus 4-year institutions, they have some of those same programs, but they also have programs just in general academic studies like sociology, anthropology, political science, right, psychology, that don't immediately translate to a career, but do offer you a variety of different options. It all just depends on what kind of degree you're interested in pursuing and specifically what you're trying to do with the degree that you have, right? The majority of the times, technical colleges or community colleges in other states that are 2-year are ideal for students who are trying to save money. In those first 2 years, you can take your general ed courses at a community college or a technical college, save a lot in tuition for those first 2 years, and then transfer to a public state university or a private institution. That's actually what quite a few of the volunteers here at FOPE have done. They started off at like Georgia Perimeter College and then had gone to Georgia State and then gone to UGA and taken a stepped approach to eventually end up graduating from the college or university that they've wanted to graduate from the entire time, right? But throughout taking the stepped approach, they've saved themselves money because instead of paying $8,948 in tuitions their first year at Georgia State, they could have paid a significant, like a third, a fourth of that at a technical college, taking the same general education courses, which would be the courses that you would take in math, literature, writing, right, and things like that. Bye, minor. Okay. Things to consider if you are an immigrant student. So throughout my time here working at Hope in the Consulate General of Mexico, I've been privy to a lot of students who are navigating complex experiences with college, right? So depending on your immigration status, there are a couple of things I can tell you ahead of time that you should take into consideration when you're building your college list and looking for ways to cover for the cost of your college or university education. And I'll kind of go through these one by one, but on the screen, you'll see that I'll right now mention asylum seekers, TPS holders, students whose parents have the H or L series visas, if you're a student with the F1, F2 visa, if you are on the TD visa, or if you're an undocumented student or DACA recipient. Right now, we have a lot of students from South America who are coming to the United States seeking asylum. So that is a very finicky process. So, and I'll clarify in a second. There's a lot of confusion when it comes to federal and state aid with our asylum students. Because there is a difference between being an asylum seeker and you're in the process of applying for asylum versus being a student who has been granted asylum. So there is a distinction there. When you come to the United States and you're seeking asylum, you are typically considered an undocumented immigrant who is eligible to receive a work permit and a social security number, right, while you're undergoing your application for asylum. And sometimes some of the things that I'm seeing right now with a lot of our students from South America is that while they're waiting on their application for asylum, they've also submitted another application for TPS, which is temporary protective status, which is a whole other immigration status. Depending on what case ends up being granted first, that affects what you're eligible for in terms of federal and state financial aid, but also how you're classified as an in-state or out-of-state student. If you are a student who's graduating from high school and your case for asylum has not yet been approved, until it's been approved, you will be classified as an out-of-state student and will have to pay the out-of-state tuition rate, which tends to be 3 to 4 times higher than the in-state tuition rate. If your case for TPS is approved, you remain considered an out-of-state student. But if your asylum case is approved and you receive a letter from the United States Citizen and Immigration Services, USCIS, that says that you have been granted asylum. The minute that you have that letter, you become eligible for federal and state aid, financial aid programs, and you could then be considered an in-state student. So you could then reduce your total cost of tuition. It all depends on where you are in the process. But until you have received letters of approval for TPS or asylum, until then you are considered an undocumented student for the purposes of determining if you're eligible for financial aid and tuition classification. So like I mentioned, also in addition to our asylum seekers from South America, a lot of the students that have the opportunity to help out right now have TPS or temporary protected status, and they're from Central America, typically from El Salvador. In the case of you having TPS or temporary protected status, like I mentioned under the same conversation of asylum seekers, you are ineligible for federal and state aid programs, which I'll cover in a second, and you would be classified as an out-of-state tuition student unless your immigration status can be adjusted and you end up with a different immigration status while you're still in college. While you're in college, your situation might change, right? Depending on the processes that you have. And then if it does change, depending on what immigration status you then have next, it could be that you can become eligible for financial assistance and lower tuition rates, but it all depends on what your immigration status is while you hold TPS and after. We also have a lot of students who are of Mexican heritage, whose parents have the H or L series visa, which means that they also have the H or L series visas. These visas are employment visas. So they typically means that you as a student who's graduating from a Georgia high school, your parents are coming from Mexico or a different country outside of the US for the purposes of temporary employment. Because your parents have the H or L series visas, you're also granted the H or L series visas, which for the purposes of tuition, you're initially classified as an out-of-state student. But if for some reason your family is in the process of applying to become a legal permanent resident, as you're in that process, you can always reach out to colleges and universities to see if you can apply for an in-state tuition waiver. That way you can reduce your cost of tuition. But if you and your family have these two visas, H or L series, and you're not in the process of adjusting to legal permanent residency, then for the purposes of tuition, you'll remain classified as an out-of-state student. If you have the F1 or F2 and even the TD visa, this means that colleges and universities would classify you as an international student. And depending on the college or university, this could mean that you're paying a similar tuition rate as an out-of-state college student, or you pay a little bit higher than even an out-of-state college student, but it all depends on the college or university. Like I mentioned, most private universities have one flat rate, a tuition rate for everyone, regardless of how you're classified. Then public universities tend to make the differences depending on how you're classified. Y de último, undocumented students and students who have DACA are also classified as out-of-state by public institutions. But like I've been mentioning for everyone so far, private institutions don't necessarily classify you as an out-of-state student, and you would be eligible for the same programs as everyone else if they're institutional programs. Okay, in this last section, it's going to be really important for immigrant students to really focus on the last portion, which is me talking about scholarships and the resources that are out there to help you find resources, both at a college or university, but also scholarship opportunities that are external or private and they're not given to you by the government or a college or university. So the next portion is paying for college. And how do we actually get you the financial assistance to cover the cost of your education, right? How do we get tuition covered? How do we get room and board covered? So we've covered federal aid programs. Now I'll go into specifics about state aid programs. This includes Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, and then California. But before we go into that, I'll focus on the federal programs. Right now, if you are a student who is a US citizen, a US national, a legal permanent resident, a refugee, or a student who has been granted asylum, one of the most important things that you need to do is to apply to the or fill out the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It is literally an application that opens up every academic year so that you as a student can apply for additional financial assistance every year in college. If you apply this year when it opens up on October 1st, it means that colleges and universities will have your income and tax information, not of this year, but from 2021, and will use that information to determine what kind of federal financial aid opportunities you're eligible for your freshman year of college, not this year, but in 2022, 2023 and 2024. So FAFSA dates can be confusing, right? The year that it opens, 2022, means it's available for aid in 2023, but it uses your financial information from 2021. So it's a 2-year kind of time frame. For every college year that you're starting, and your FAFSA was using information from 2 years ago because the application itself opened up a year before your classes even started. But this application is used to kind of determine, like I mentioned, the different forms of financial assistance that you're eligible for. And at the federal level, there's actually quite a bit of limitations on who's eligible for federal financial aid. So as long as you know that you are a US citizen, a US national, so you're a native of American Samoa or the Swains Island, if you're a legal permanent resident, if you are a refugee, if you have been granted asylum, if you are a Cuban Haitian entrant, if you are a conditional entrant or a parolee, have the T visa, which is different from the TD visa. The T visa is for victims of human trafficking or immediate relatives of victims of human trafficking. And then lastly, if you are considered a battered immigrant qualified alien. If you have any of these immigration statuses, you will be eligible for the following forms of financial aid that I'll cover in a second. This next portion is a lot of information, so I apologize ahead of time. When we're talking about federal financial aid, which is money that's coming from the federal government, you can broken up into 3 different categories. Grants, which are money that you don't have to repay unless you withdraw from the school or owe a refund before you were able to complete your studies. Loans, and then the federal work-study program. When it comes to grants, typically the one form of grant that is found across the majority of the students that we work with and their financial aid letters is the federal Pell Grant. The federal Pell Grant is up to $6,495 every year, unless it increases every year, of grant money that you do not have to repay. How much you receive in the Pell Grant is determined by how much it costs to attend your particular college or university and how much your expected family contribution or SAI, which is the new term for it, is low or high, and if you are a part-time or full-time student. So depending on if you are enrolled part-time or full-time, if your college is significantly more expensive than what you can afford, it is possible, especially if you are of a low or limited income family background, you could receive upwards of $6,495 every year in free money. And this money is automatically applied by the college or universities to your tuition, to your room and board, wherever it can be applied to after all other forms of aid have already been applied. In addition to this grant, you could get access to the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or the FSEO grant, which could be somewhere between $100 to $4,000 every year. And it all depends on the college or university that you're attending, and it's available in a limited capacity. Typically, the more expensive your total cost of attendance will be, the more likely you are to receive a higher FSEO grant. Or if your expected family contribution or how much they expect you to pay out of pocket is a lot higher, you might receive a bit of a higher grant here, but it really depends on the school and how much funds they have available to award to students. So this could be a bit inconsistent. One year you might receive $100, next year you might receive a bit more if your financial situation or the cost of attendance have changed and things like that. You could also receive the Iraq and Afghanistan service grants. This is offered to students who are ineligible for the Pell Grant, so they might not be from low or limited income backgrounds, but one of their parents or guardians was in the US Armed Forces and may have passed away in Iraq or Afghanistan post 9/11. And then the last grant that someone might be able to receive is the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education, or TEACH grant. This is specifically available to students who have applied and been enrolled in a teacher preparation program. So in a college or university, it specifically offers academic programs that can prepare you to become a teacher, right? Students who are in these eligible programs could receive upwards of an additional $4,000 to help cover the cost of education. And there are additional requirements in this, but one of the things that is really important for you to know is if you're interested in becoming a teacher, when you're researching what schools have teacher preparation programs, you should look out for if the program is a teach grant eligible program. If it is, you could potentially receive an additional $4,000 to help offset the cost of your total cost of attendance at that particular college or university. When we're talking about loans, this is money that you borrow and that you have to pay back. And depending on the loan, you'd have to pay it back with interest. So for example, we have the direct subsidized loan, the direct unsubsidized loan, and then direct parent plus loans. It's important for you to note that the majority of the students, if not all students, will have loans on their financial aid package, but they are optional. You're not required to take them or accept them, or you could accept part of them, but not all of it. It is completely up to you. The direct subsidized loan is one that's available to students who are from low or limited income background or who demonstrate a financial necessity. These loans do not increase in interest while you're in school. So for example, your freshman year, if you take out a subsidized loan of $1,000, by the time that you graduate from college, it's still $1,000. It does not begin to increase until after you've graduated. A direct unsubsidized loan is available to all, if not the majority of undergraduate students, and it's not based on financial necessity. These loans do increase in interest while you're in school. So a loan of $1,000 might be $1,150 by the time that you graduate, depending on the loan interest rate. And the last option is the direct plus loans or parent plus loans, which are available to parents and only parents of dependent undergraduate students. Eligibility is not based on financial necessity, but there is a credit check that's required. And if your parents have an adverse credit history or bad credit history, they might need to meet additional requirements to qualify. Something that's really important here when we're talking about federal financial aid, the only person whose immigration status matters for the purposes of financial aid is yours as a student. Your parents' immigration status does not impact, when we're talking about federal financial aid, what you are eligible for and what you could accept and receive to help pay for college. The only moment where your parents' immigration status might impact what kind of aid you as a family could apply to is the Parent Plus loan. Undocumented parents or parents without a social security number would not be able to apply to the Direct Plus loan or Parent Plus loan program. In that moment, if you need additional loans, you could pursue private loans, but at the very end of this presentation, I'll explain why that is complicated. And I do not advise students to take out private loans. The advice would be to find an institution that would not put you in a position to need private loans. But ultimately, dependent students, so students who are considered dependent on their families or household income, could borrow up to $5,500 in their first year. Independent students and dependent students who aren't eligible for the Parent Plus loan could borrow upwards of $9,500 an academic year. Colleges and universities can help determine what loans you're eligible for and what quantity you're eligible for. This is not something that you have to go out of your way to determine. It is something that colleges and universities, specifically their offices of financial aid, do all the work once they receive your income and tax information through the FAFSA application. And then lastly, the last kind of form of financial aid that you could receive at the federal level is the federal work study program, which is where the federal government gives your college or university a set amount of funds so that you are able to apply to an on-campus job and they're able to pay part of your income with those funds. This is a way for the federal government to support colleges and universities in being able to create and maintain job opportunities for low to limited income students who are at their institutions. So typically, some colleges and universities go out of their way for the first couple of weeks at a college or university. The students who can apply to jobs would be students who are on federal work study, or they offer job opportunities that are only available to federal work study students. That way, you as a student can actually access the funds that you get through federal work study. So for example, when you get your letter of financial aid, your letter might say that you have $1,250 every semester in federal work study money. That does not mean that you automatically get that money. It does not mean that the college can use that money to pay for things that you owe them. It means the money is there so that if and when you apply to a job, you can then earn that money and then use it appropriately for your educational expenses. So this is a lot on federal financial aid. I promise you there's actually quite a bit more on how we can support you in preparing for the FAFSA application and getting all your documents in order, explaining all of this to your parents whose their support is going to be really essential to helping you get this application done. So one of the things that we're doing on the 12th of October is hosting a Noche de FAFSA. That presentation will be in Spanish. And right now my team and I are trying to determine if we're able to, if we have the capacity to host a FAFSA night in English. That way you as a student, if your predominant language is English, can also learn more about what you need to know going into the application. But for the meantime, our next event will be Noche de FAFSA in Spanish. The same webpage that you use to register for this one will host the registration link for our next event. And that one will go into a little bit more detail about the whole process itself. We'll cover and mention again what I just covered about who's eligible and what kind of money you can receive. But the focus at that event will be helping you actually go through the application and prepare for the questions that it'll ask you and prepare for the steps that come after submitting the actual application. This is really important if your parents have general questions or concerns about how to go about supporting you as you're applying to colleges and universities. This is one of those moments where they really can come into the process that you're undergoing and help you out as much as possible. The expectation is not that you have everything figured out beforehand, but we can help you and prepare before you start the application. Okay, so now we'll go into the state-based programs that I mentioned, right? And for us specifically, that means that I'll cover briefly Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, and California. So please focus on the state aid programs that are relevant to the state that you live in. If you're a Georgia student, there isn't any need for you to pay attention to what I'm saying for North Carolina or Tennessee. It would not apply to you unless you suddenly move and graduate from one of those states' high schools. So if you plan on making that kind of transition in life, then please pay attention, but otherwise only focus on the state that you currently reside in, because that'll be more specific to the opportunities available to you. And on occasion, the requirements that might mean that you're eligible for the opportunity or that might restrict you from the opportunity. But what's really important to note, right, is that the federal government establishes the rules and the expectations for the money that they can give you as a college student. And states have the opportunity to do the same for their state aid programs. So as I'm talking today, you'll find that there are some similarities across the states, but there'll also be minor differences across the states. And that all has to do with how they're able to fund their financial aid opportunities or their programs, what restrictions or limitations they impose on them, and then ultimately what is available to their students, right? This could mean that they establish specific academic expectations that you need to meet by the time that you graduate from high school. There might be academic expectations that you need to meet while you're in college. They might limit how much they can give you while you're pursuing 4 years of college education. They'll have their own policies on determining residency and who's considered a resident of their state, and then how they classify you for tuition as well. To start us off, we'll focus on Georgia and the state aid programs here. What's really important to know, right, is that here in Georgia, we have the Georgia Student Finance Commission that was founded in 1965. They're the ones who bring to us Georgia Futures, which is the state organization that you have access to, right, in order to learn all about planning for college and your education after high school, whether that is a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, right, going into technical college, a public institution or private institution. They can offer you assistance in all those topics, even career exploration and more. But one of the main purposes that they were established for is to help provide Georgians with information on the financial aid programs that our state is able to offer to students. So here specifically on the screen, you see the Zell Miller Scholarship, the Hope Scholarship, Hope and Zell Miller Grants, and the Hope Career Grants. A lot of the times as high school students in Georgia, all you really hear about are the Zell Miller Scholarship and the Hope Scholarship, and you don't really hear about the grants. So I'll briefly cover what those grants are for. The Georgia Hope Grant is available to residents who are working towards a certificate or diploma at an eligible college or university in Georgia. There is no specific high school GPA required for this grant, but they do require that you have a 2.0 GPA while you're pursuing your certificate or diploma at a college or university. So there are specific moments throughout your time at that college where they check your GPA. And as long as you have a 2.0 and higher at that college or university while you're getting your certificate or diploma, you can maintain access to that Hope Grant. Georgia Zell Miller Grant is available to residents who are working towards a certificate or diploma at a technical college in the technical college system of Georgia, or a TCSG, or a public state institution within the university system of Georgia. So this could be UGA, this could be Georgia State University, this could be Gwinnett Tech, Chattahoochee Tech, Athens Tech, right? There is no specific high school GPA required for this grant, but you must have a 3.5 to maintain it while in college. So while you're pursuing your certificate or diploma, similar to the Hope Grant, they'll also check your GPA to determine if you're on the right track with your academic performance in order to keep funding your education. The Hope Career Grant is available to any students who are eligible for the Hope Grant and are enrolled in specific majors that are relevant to jobs and occupations that are in high demand here in Georgia. I don't cover it in today's presentation, but I could bring it up during the Q&A part. There is an actual webpage on the Technical College System of Georgia's website where they show you all the degree programs that you could pursue that would be completely tuition free for students who are considered in-state resident students. And it's through the Hope Career Grant and the Hope Grant. Both of those together can cover your tuition completely if you're pursuing degrees or certification programs in jobs that we really need to fill in our state. Now, to move on to the more popular scholarship programs that we have, right? The Hope Scholarship is something that is governed and overseen and dispersed by the Georgia State government, Georgia Futures, the Georgia Student Finance Commission. It has nothing to do with our organization, Hope. We simply have Hope both in our names, but we're completely distinct entities. Sometimes we do get confusion from students who think that by participating in our programs, they become or remain eligible for the Hope Scholarship. But all we can really do is guide you towards the requirements, because the Hope Scholarship itself is something that's run by the state. Basic eligibility requirements for this scholarship and Zell Miller, you'll find there's the basic requirements are the same, is that you are a US citizen or you're an eligible non-citizen. So this means that you are a legal permanent resident, a US national, you are a refugee, an asylee, someone who has been granted asylum. If you have received the T visa for victims of human trafficking, or if you are considered a battered immigrant qualified alien. So as long as you had one of those initial immigration status that I mentioned while I was talking about the federal programs, you meet that first bullet point here. And as long as you meet the post-secondary institutions Georgia residency requirements, so as long as you are able to prove that you are a resident of the state of Georgia, right, and that you have been here for the very least a year, you've graduated from a Georgia high school in a year been here at least a year prior to the start of your academic year at a college or university, you could meet with those residency requirements. The college or university that you are attending is actually the one who determines, helps you through the residency determination process. So that's not something that you necessarily have to go out of your way to do. And then you need to be enrolled in a college or university that's a part of the University System of Georgia, UGA, Georgia State, Valdosta State University, University of North Georgia, the Technical College System of Georgia, which could be like Athens Tech, Chattahoochee Tech, Gwinnett Tech, an eligible private Hope eligible college or university in Georgia, which could be like Emory University, Oglethorpe University, Agnes Scott or Berry College. And that for male students that you meet the federal selective service registration requirements. So specifically, any males who were born on or after January 1st, after 1960, and are at least 18 years of age, are a citizen or eligible non-citizen, you have to register for the selective service, which is the US's draft system. We have not had a draft in decades, but you just have to actually register with the selective service to comply with expectations. And it's something that could take you less than 10 minutes to do online. And then you're given a letter that confirms that you've completed registration for selective service. You must meet academic achievement standards. So each of these scholarship opportunities have their specific criteria. You must be in good standing with all student loans or other financial aid programs. This includes federal and state. That you must be in compliance with the Georgia Drug-Free Post-Secondary Education Act of 1990, and that you have not been awarded more than you can be awarded by any of the HOPE programs that are available to students. And then when we're talking about the academic eligibility, for the HOPE scholarship, there's two things to consider. You can be eligible for HOPE immediately upon graduation if you go to a college or university right after, or a year or two after, right? And that if you're eligible for the HOPE scholarship, if you have graduated with the minimum of a 3.0 HOPE GPA, your HOPE GPA is not typically the GPA that's on your transcript. That's specifically, the HOPE GPA typically refers to the GPA that's calculated based off of your core classes, math, science, social studies, history, language arts, literature, and your foreign language courses. It does not include any of your elective courses. One of the easiest ways to determine what your HOPE GPA is, if your counselors don't already help you do that, or it's not on your transcript, is to create an account on Georgia Features. As long as your social security number, if you have a social security number, is on the file at the school, your school record should be able to sync with the Georgia Features website, and the Georgia Features website can help you track your HOPE GPA all 4 years of high school. And then by the time that you graduate, the second requirement is that you have at minimum, you've earned at least 4 full rigor credits from courses off of the academic rigor course list. These could be courses that are AP, IB, if your school offers international baccalaureate. These could be accelerated courses, dual enrollment courses, courses beyond your typical college prep courses, and there's a full list available online. The expectation is that by the time that you graduate, you have at least 4 of these classes. They don't need to all be 4 AP, all 4 dual enrollment. It could be a mixture of any rigorous courses. Let's say, on the other hand, right, you graduate from a Georgia high school, but by the time that you graduate, you didn't have the GPA requirement. Maybe you didn't earn the minimum of 4 full rigor credits by the time that you graduate from high school. You can actually earn eligibility while in college. So once you start college, after you've attempted 30, 60, or 90 semester hours, or 45, 90, or 135 quarter hours, depending on if your college uses semester hours or quarter hours. The only college that I know that uses quarter hours is SCAD, which means that they have 4 school sessions instead of 2 school sessions in an academic year. And then while you're in college, you earn that minimum of a 3.0 HOPE GPA. If you're able to do that while in college, you can become eligible for the HOPE scholarship. The HOPE scholarship is ultimately a merit-based award available to Georgia residents, so they don't just give it to everyone. As long as you're able to meet both the basic and academic eligibility requirements, you will be eligible for the scholarship. And there are 2 ways to apply for the scholarship. Either you just fill out FAFSA, and colleges and universities use that in your college application to determine if you're eligible for the HOPE scholarship, or there's also the financial aid application on the Georgia Futures website that you can fill it out once and it'd be relevant for 4 years, or you fill out FAFSA for every year. For me, the easiest thing to have you do is do FAFSA. You can knock out 2 birds with 1 stone, but at the end of the day, the offices of financial aid at every college and university will help determine if you're eligible for HOPE or Zell Miller, which is the next opportunity I'll cover. So Zell Miller has the same basic eligibility criteria for immigration and US citizenship requirements, etc. The academic eligibility is what's a little bit different. For Zell Miller, because it's a lot more of it has a lot more stringent academic requirements. You have to graduate with at least a minimum of a 3.7 Hope GPA. So specifically a GPA that's calculated off of your core classes, right? And then earn that minimum of 4 full rigor credits, so of advanced courses or rigorous courses that you've taken, and then earn a qualifying test score on a single national or state district administration of the ACT or SAT prior to graduating. So this is either getting a 26 on the ACT or a minimum score of 1,200 for the SAT. Okay. And then the other alternative, you could, if you're named as the valedictorian or salutatorian of your graduating class, all you would need would be to have a 3.0 Hope GPA and the minimum of 4 rigor credits. There are expectations for both Hope and Zell Miller for you while you're in college, so you can lose the scholarships and you're able to regain them, I believe, once while in college. But there are expectations of you once you start your classes in college that you maintain specific GPA requirements to keep the funding going year after year. Okay, to transition to our North Carolina fams. You also have an organization similar to our Georgia Features. It's your College Foundation of North Carolina, or CFNC. You all have an amazing team of outreach representatives that typically visit your high schools to help promote information on higher education in your state of North Carolina, and more importantly, on the financial aid programs available to you as North Carolina residents. Specifically, this could be like the North Carolina Education Lottery Grant, the College Grant, Need-Based Grant, and the Need-Based Scholarship. When we're going through this list one by one, the Community College Grant is available to North Carolina resident students who are enrolled in at least 6 credit hours per semester, who meet satisfactory academic progress requirements of the college or university they're enrolled in. The Education Lottery Scholarship is available to students who are considered North Carolina resident students for the purposes of tuition, are also enrolled in at least 6 credit hours per semester, are admitted and enrolled and classified as an undergraduate student, which means you're a student who's pursuing that 4-year degree or certificate program at an eligible North Carolina institution. This includes the UNC campuses and North Carolina Community College campuses. The NC Need-Based Scholarship is available to students who are considered North Carolina residents for the purposes of tuition, are enrolled as an undergraduate student, and have at least 9 credit hours at a qualifying private North Carolina campus, and also meets the requirements for the federal Pell Grant. You're eligible for any one of these college grants or scholarships depending on your residency status, the number of credits that you're enrolled in, and what kind of college or university you're enrolled in, admitted at, and what kind of program you're pursuing, whether that is a certificate, diploma, or a 4-year degree. When we're talking about our California state and our fam out at Benjamin Holt, you also have another, a lot of the times I look at different states and I compared them to what Georgia has. You also have another organization similar to our Georgia Features or our Georgia Student Finance Commission. And for you, that's called the California Student Aid Commission, or the CSAC. And as a commission, they are committed to ensuring California students can attend and afford colleges all throughout your state. So you all have quite a few opportunities and even more that are not listed on this slide. And that would be the Cal Grant A, B, and C, the California Chaffee Grant for foster youth, the Middle Class Scholarship, the California Military Department GI Bill Award Program, the Law Enforcement Personnel Dependence Grant Program, and the Golden State Teacher Grant Program. For today, I'm only going to focus on a couple of them because we could be here for another 30 minutes just talking about California. But the Cal Grant A can help pay for tuition and fees at 4-year colleges. Cal Grant B can help provide a living allowance up to $1,648 in addition to helping you cover your tuition and fee assistance after your first year at a 2 or 4-year college in your state. Cal Grant C helps students kind of cover the cost of a technical or career education program. The Chaffee Grant for foster youth awards up to $5,000 a year to eligible foster youth. It could be used at any eligible California college or university or career or technical school in your state. The middle class scholarship is for undergraduate students pursuing a teaching credential. So those who are looking to become teachers in your state. The middle class scholarship is specifically for students whose family income and assets are upwards of $200,000 a year. And then you also have, not listed here, the state university grants, which are need-based awards at your state universities, California state universities. Then you also have the community college promise grants, which waives enrollment fees at the CCs. And then you also have UC grants, all which are institution specific. So you have a lot available to you. California is one of the amazing states in our country that offers a lot in financial aid programs and access to our undocumented youth. So for undocumented students specifically in California, you have a specific application that allows you access to these financial aid programs. And there are a lot of transition programs in California that help you get your first 2 years of education covered at a community college before you're eligible to transition to a 4-year institution. For Tennessee, our neighbors and literally the state up north of us. For you, you have an amazing website called College for Tennessee. That's a website brought to you all by your state's Higher Education Commission and the Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation. They both work together to really help increase the number of Tennesseans who are able to get a post-secondary credential. And similar to California, you also have a lot of amazing opportunities available to you. A lot of these will have immigration or residency restrictions. So it's going to be really important for you to explore what limitation your state aid programs has as you're reading through all of them. But today I'm going to focus on the Tennessee Hope Scholarship and then the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. So starting on the Hope Scholarship, it's similar to the Hope program here in Georgia. It's established and funded by your state's lottery, and it's awarded to freshmen who are enrolled at an eligible post-secondary institution at the very least 16 months after graduating from a Tennessee eligible high school. So as long as you're a resident, you graduated from a Tennessee high school, and you're attending a college or university or another eligible program at least within 16 months after graduating, you could be eligible for upwards of $2,250 per full-time enrollment each semester at a 4-year institution or 2-year institution with on-campus housing as a freshman or sophomore. And this amount goes up a little bit to $2,850 during your junior and senior year. The Tennessee Promise Scholarship is also available to Tennessee residents who are U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. So it will also be available to students in Tennessee who are U.S. nationals, legal permanent residents, refugees, asylees, on the T visa, immigrant, battered qualified aliens, so long as you graduate from an eligible high school, homeschool, or GED high-set program. You can receive an award. The amount varies every year, but as long as you're enrolled in an eligible post-secondary college or university, your scholarship can go towards tuition or any mandatory fees after all other forms of financial aid have been applied. So it seems to be like a last dollar scholarship that covers whatever remains. For our Alabama fam in Foley, Alabama, you also have quite a few programs available to you. In your state, everything's kind of overseen by Alabama's Commission on Higher Educations, specifically their Office of Student Assistance, which is responsible for administering the following state programs: the Alabama Student Assistance Program, the Student Grant Program, the National Guard Educational Assistance Program, the Alabama Math and Science Teacher Education Program, and then the Police Officer and Firefighter Survival Educational Assistance Program. Today, I'll talk about two of these, which starting off is the Alabama Student Assistance Program, which is a state-funded supplemental source of financial assistance for any student who has demonstrated an established or demonstrated financial need. They give priority to students who are Pell Grant recipients. It's only available to students who are considered Alabama residents and are participating in an Alabama institution. This could be somewhere between $300 to $5,000 per every academic year that you're enrolled at a college or university. The Alabama Student Grant Program provides similar assistance to residents attending certain institutions, so long as you're not enrolled in a theological, divinity, or religious vocational studies program. The grant amount varies per year, but it won't ever exceed about $3,000 per academic year. Okay, that was a lot of information, but so far we've been able to cover federal and state aid programs, right? So as long as you have a full understanding of how your immigration status currently affects what's available to you, it's going to be your responsibility to kind of begin doing your research to make sure that you're meeting the requirements to fill out the FAFSA application for federal aid, and that you're able to meet the academic requirements or initial eligibility requirements for any state-based programs that are available in your state, and making sure that there are no restrictions based on immigration status or residency determination. A lot of this will be quite a bit of finicky research work, but as long as you dedicate some time throughout fall semester, by the time that spring semester comes around your senior year, you should have a significantly better idea of what forms of financial assistance are available to you. And this can help you as you start making final decisions in your second semester of senior year. If you are an underclassman, if you are a 9th, 10th grader, or 11th grader, you have a lot more time to be able to do a lot of this research. And that is actually really beneficial to you because you'll have time to better plan and prepare to explore other opportunities to help cover the gaps in different areas. When we're talking about scholarships, a lot of what I mentioned so far, right? A lot of these were called scholarships or grants. Specifically in this section, we're going to talk about institutional and external scholarships. So institutional scholarships specifically being scholarship opportunities or programs that are offered by a specific college or university. I sadly do not have a list of scholarship programs by college or university in every state because that is an exhaustive amount of information. So one of the really important things for you to note, right, is that when you're looking for colleges and universities to add to your list of institutions that you want to apply to, one of the very first things that you need to do is check out their website to see what kind of scholarships and grants are available to you if you become a student at their institution, right? So a lot of the times your financial aid package is federal, state aid, institutional or university or college aid. And then it comes with everything else that are the last things that I'll cover today, which are like payment plans, tuition reimbursement programs, out-of-pocket costs, things like that. But the third biggest form of covering your costs for higher education is money that's coming specifically from a college or university that you've applied to. Institutional scholarships can tend to be offered in one of two ways. They can be given to you automatically upon admission. So they'll email you, they'll send you a letter, and they tell you that you've been offered an offer of admissions for their institution, a part of their incoming class of 2023, right? And they might tell you right off the bat what kinds of scholarships or grants you've been awarded that you're eligible for, or your financial aid award letter will automatically include them. And if that's what the college or university does, amazing. You need to do your research though, because every college and university does something slightly different. And there are some colleges out there that have these processes separate. So separate from you applying to college, being offered admissions, right, is their process for scholarships and grants. A good institution that I use as an example for this is Kennesaw State University here northeast of Atlanta. Kennesaw State University has their college admissions process, but they have a whole separate deadline for students who are interested in becoming, and prospective students interested in becoming enrolled students to apply to scholarship opportunities. So if you receive the offer of admissions, but you don't pay attention to the other deadlines that they have listed on their website, you might miss out on the opportunity to apply to scholarships that that college or university can offer you, right? Why colleges and universities have these separate processes and some have them together could come down to the amount of funding that's available at a particular college or university, or it could be due to any policies or rules that they may have in place when it comes to financial aid programs at their institution. But it's going to be on you to explore their website, specifically the websites of their Office of Financial Aid, to see if you can find out more about their scholarship award process. And if push comes to shove and you can't find that information on their website, you can always call their Office of Financial Aid and simply ask them if they can explain to you if scholarships and grants are awarded upon admissions or if they have separate processes and deadlines for students to apply to scholarships that they might offer. As long as you're able to abide by whatever they have set in place, you can help very easy. You can help yourself very easily get access to additional funding that's coming directly from your college or university, right? Some institutions who do offer financial aid upon admissions could be like Oglethorpe University, who I believe the last time I checked their website, if you applied early decision to Oglethorpe University, which is in Brookhaven, slightly northwest of Atlanta, if you apply to them by early decision, which is November 1st, you could be eligible for a full tuition scholarship at their institution, right? There are specific academic requirements and you have to be offered an offer of admissions, but Oglethorpe University is one of those institutions that is an example of as long as they offer you an offer of admissions, automatically a part of that could be an offer of scholarships or grants as a part of your financial aid letter. This is all institutional. At every college and university, they have different things available. Some colleges, like private institutions, might have a significant amount of funding available to students that sometimes can sit there unused if college students don't actually go out of their way to apply, explore, or investigate what opportunities are available to them. At public state universities, especially the smaller ones, there might be less funding available and there might be more stricter or formal processes for applying to college scholarships, that you have to go out of your way to find out what that process is so that you can do what's best for you and take advantage of the opportunities available to you to offset the costs of higher education, right? On the other hand, something that you're probably more accustomed to hearing when we're talking about scholarships or grants, it's all the scholarship opportunities that exist out in the world that are coming from different places, right? These are typically called private or external scholarships, and they're typically offered by foundations, organizations, or businesses. Specifically, one of the things that our Georgia students are going to see tomorrow via email, if you're a Hope member, is an email about the LCF educational grant, which is a grant that's offered by the Latino Community Fund here in Georgia to students who participate in after-school educational programs and things like that. And it could be $1,000 of free money if your application is amazing and you're selected as one of their 2022 scholars, right? And this is a private or external scholarship that's offered by a foundation. Hope last year was able to offer a couple $1,000 scholarships to a couple of our students who applied and were selected. And this was an external or private scholarship offered to students by an organization, right? And then lastly, El Consulado General de México, a través del IME, which is the Institute for Mexicans in the Exterior or Abroad, works with colleges and universities to offer IME becas, which are scholarships available to students of Mexican heritage at particular colleges. So this year it's GGC, Bernal, and like maybe 3 other colleges that are currently slipping my minds. But in some institutions here in Georgia and in Tennessee, if you're of a Mexican heritage, the Mexican consulate, with the help of a college or university, can offer you a one-time grant or scholarship for that year, right? And this, in this case, comes from a foundation/organization. And then ultimately, external and private scholarships can even come from your churches or parent-teacher associations. Sometimes these are small opportunities. These are $250. These are $500. These could be $1,000 opportunities, right? One of the biggest mistakes that students do is only focusing their time and energy on the big dollar scholarships that could completely pay for everything. And they ignore the smaller opportunities that are going there unused, right? And no one has applied. And by ignoring those opportunities, they're missing out on the opportunity to stack scholarships and start collecting money bit by bit, right? $500 is the difference between you being able to pay for a couple of your textbooks or being able to buy a nicer laptop, right? Or being able to put money down on a used car so you can commute to school, right? $1,000 can make a slightly even bigger difference, right? Between buying a Windows or a MacBook, depending on what your likes are when it comes to laptops. It could be the difference between buying a flight to your out-of-state institution if you want to explore a different college or university, things like that. But one of the things that you have to do, right, is begin that exploration for scholarships as soon as possible. So if you're eligible for federal and state aid, fill out FAFSA. That will automatically trickle down, right? It'll be sent to colleges and universities that you're interested in. They'll determine if you're eligible for federal and state aid, depending on the policies for your state and how they disperse information on federal state aid programs and award scholarships or grants. And then a part of that is either you automatically being considered for scholarships, or you have to go out of your way to apply for scholarships at each college or university that you've applied to. And then lastly, the part that is almost always completely separate from all of this is you having to find external or private scholarships available to you. One of the easiest things you can do is go to our website, www.hopestrong.org/education. Shameless plug. On the website, we have a very simple but brief guide on searching for scholarship opportunities. On there, what we are able to do for you is give you a brief list of scholarship search engines and websites that we trust will not scam you, collect your information, and sell your information as you're applying to scholarship opportunities. Because scholarship opportunities are out there. It's all a matter of helping yourself connect to them and apply to them and take the time to write those essays, submit the video recordings that they require you, participate in interviews, so that you're doing your best to increase your likelihoods of getting more funding. One of the things that we do, every month, if you are a member and participating in one of our high school chapters, is that I try my best with our team to include scholarship opportunities that are open during that given month or will close during the next couple of months. That way you and your peers are connected to scholarship opportunities that ideally have reasonable academic expectations, might not have immigration requirements, so that way it's easier for our immigrant students to apply. But one of the things that you need to do when you're participating in these monthly meetings is actually jot down the information, the scholarships we mentioned, and go out of your way to see if these scholarship opportunities are something that you're able to apply to. The majority of the time, these scholarship opportunities are available to senior students or students who have become college students, That doesn't mean that if you're a 9th grader or a 10th grader or a junior, that doesn't mean that you have to wait until your senior year to begin researching, to begin applying. You can begin that process earlier, and it's a lot better to start that earlier rather than later. At the very least, if a scholarship opportunity specifically states a specific grade that you need to be in order to apply, what you are able to do in that moment is copy down the link, copy down the name of the scholarship, how much they award, what are the requirements, what are the questions? Could you be prepared writing the essays for things like this? And then when the time comes that you become eligible for scholarship opportunities, you already have a lot of the information that you need to know if the opportunity is worth your time, if it's good for you, if it's something that you are able to do. And if it is, you're able to knock these out of the way a little bit easier. Now, if you're a senior and you haven't started searching for scholarships or you haven't started applying, don't freak out. You have time, but I would start sooner rather than later. Right now, especially during fall semester, a lot of the major scholarship opportunities like Coca-Cola Scholars Program, the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation Program, QuestBridge, Golden Doors, Dream.us, a lot of these scholarships that could give you full tuition or full rides to a college or university are closing in fall semester. They tend to be aligned with early decision, early action, and the earliest regular decision college application deadlines. If you wait until spring, there will still be opportunities available. A lot of these opportunities will be specific to the college or universities that you are applying to, and there will still be opportunities available outside of colleges and universities, the external or private ones, but a lot of the major big ones will have closed already. So you'll want to start sooner rather than later. When it comes to scholarships, there's a lot of different kinds of scholarships, They're a full ride, which means that they cover everything of your total cost of attendance at a particular college or university, so long as you maintain specific requirements or academic expectations that they have of you. A good example of this is QuestBridge, which, like I mentioned earlier, is a scholarship for limited income but high achieving high school students. There are full tuition scholarships, which would be like the POSSE full tuition scholarship program. We have the opportunity to nominate any of our student officers every year who is a graduating senior during the application cycle for this full tuition scholarship. Golden Doors, Dream.us are also full tuition scholarships for undocumented and DACA students. There are scholarships that are based on necessity. So based on if you are of a limited or low income family background, or even if you're of a middle class background, but the total cost of attendance at an institution is significantly higher than what you can afford to pay, there are scholarships that are based on that necessity, They'll ask you for your income or tax information. There are also scholarships that are based on merit, whether this is because of academic performance, academic interest in a particular career or major program. This could be because of your athletic skill, because you have done community service or continue to do community service, things like that. And then within these four broad categories of full ride, full tuition, need-based, merit, are all the specific categories: academic, demographic. There are scholarships specific to you if you're a Hispanic student, right? If you're a student of Hispanic heritage, and that could be like the Hispanic Heritage Youth Awards, which are currently open until early November. There is a Hispanic Scholarship Fund, which opens up spring semester of next academic semester. There are athletic scholarships, and these could be athletic scholarships that are offered to you directly by a college or university who has recruited you. These could be athletic scholarships offered by organizations or foundations that support athletic students. There are leadership scholarships, which would tie in a little bit with the Posse scholarship here. There are community service scholarships, scholarships for students with creative talents and hobbies, etc. Regardless of what kind of opportunities you're pursuing, there are a couple of things you need to always take into consideration. And that is, are they requiring proof of admissions or a projected enrollment date? Some scholarships, they run on good faith. So they are hoping that you are a high school student and that you are going to be a college student. They might confirm with your high school transcript, right? They might ask you for proof of enrollment that you've been offered an offer of admissions. Others will require like formal documentation. They'll expect official high school transcripts, not screenshots or you emailing a copy of a high school transcript. They'll expect an official letter from a college or university confirming that you're an enrolled student. So it'll be important to pay attention if a scholarship specifies that you need to have an offer of enrollment of admissions or a projected enrollment date. So sometimes scholarships will say, this is a scholarship opportunity open to students who are a part of the college or university's incoming class of 2023. This means if you're not a part of the freshman class, you likely won't be eligible to apply. Other scholarships are just like, as long as you are a first year, second, third, or fourth year in college, you can apply. Your college transcript will reflect what year you're in, should they ask for proof that you're enrolled in a college or university. Other scholarships might have limitations on geographic location or residency status. So sometimes there are foundations or organizations that offer scholarship opportunities to youth in their community. So they'll specifically state this opportunity is open to anyone from high school or college, but they have to be a resident of the state of Georgia, the resident of California, right? When you're seeing these kind of scholarship opportunities, because they're not federal or state aid programs, you're going to want to pay attention to their language and always reach out to them if you have any concerns or you're just confused. Because sometimes, the majority of the times when foundations or organizations are saying it's open to students who are residents of our state, they're not using the same definition of residency as a college or university you might use for the purpose of tuition, right, or financial aid, which might mean that these foundations or organizations may allow immigrant students who might not otherwise be considered a resident for the purpose of tuition or financial aid as residents of a particular state for the purposes of their program. To be more clear, right, let's use the example of an undocumented student. In Georgia, our residency determination policies would say that they're not a resident of our state, even though they've lived here and are graduating from a Georgia high school, so they wouldn't be eligible for federal or state aid. But one of our community organizations or foundations might use broader language and just say you just have to have a physical residency in the state, which would mean that our undocumented student would be eligible to apply to a particular scholarship, even though it's saying that it's residents of Georgia. It's just not using the same definition as a college or university has to because of state or federal guidelines. Some of these scholarships are not going to have geographic or residency status requirements. They could be just state specific or even national opportunities, right? Scholarships may always ask you for your current or projected level of educational attainment. They'll ask you if you're still in high school, if you've graduated from high school, if you have a GED, if you have 1 year of college experience, if you are on your way to graduating a 4-year institution or a 2-year institution. Just pay attention to those things, right? Some of these scholarships might be for specific targeted applicant pools. There will be scholarships available to Hispanic students, students who are women in STEM or are going to be women in STEM, students who are first generation, so the first in their families to go to college, students who might be of a limited income background, students who are Hispanic, students who are Black or African American, students who are East Asian, Pacific Islanders, right? Each scholarship could have a target applicant pool. If you're not a part of that applicant pool, based off of what you're able to read, I would not invest your time in applying to that opportunity. But if you have any room for doubt, it's a lot better to ask the scholarship provider via phone number, email, postal address if they use old-fashioned US postal mail, and ask for clarification on whether or not you're actually eligible for the opportunity. If they say yes, then shoot your shot, apply, and leave yourself open to the potentiality of receiving additional funding, right? Some scholarships will ask you for your immigration status. So similar to what I've been saying so far, US citizen, legal permanent resident, US national. Here, they're gonna use broader terms for our immigrant students. They may say eligible non-citizens, and that specifically refers to the list of students that I've been talking about during the federal financial aid section, which is refugees, asylees, legal permanent residents, students with the T visa because of human trafficking, people who are considered battered qualified immigrants, or battered immigrants, qualified aliens, people who are Cuban Haitian entrants, and things like that. If they ever use a term of ineligible immigrants or ineligible non-citizens, that is a broad term typically referring to our students who have TPS, are undocumented, have DACA. What else? Are on the U visa, H or L series employment visas, are TD, F1 or F2 visas, students who otherwise would not have been eligible for federal aid programs and possibly even their state aid programs. Then lastly, there will always be the other components, which are typical of scholarships, which are your GPA. Are they going to require a high school transcript? Are they going to require an official one, or can you just send them a scanned copy of the one that you have? Will they ask for exam scores, specifically referring to SAT, ACT? Do they require essays? Are these short response questions? Are these long essays, like your typical 5-paragraph essays? Are they going to ask letters of recommendation? If so, who are they asking them to be from? Can it be from your coach? Can it be from your employer, your pastor? Does it have to be your core subject teachers like math, language arts, science, social studies, literature? All right. Are they going to ask for a resume? Right? Are they going to ask you to participate in interviews? Are these interviews in person? Are they virtual? Are they asking for supplemental documentation? This can typically be like you submitting writing samples if it's a creative writing scholarship, art samples if it's a artistic scholarship. Maybe it's like a STEM oriented scholarship and they're requiring you to go through a technical interview or submit a project that you've done in a computer science class, things like that. There could be additional components, which is just broad language for anything else that they might throw your way. And then sometimes there are commitments that you have to uphold upon confirmation. So sometimes scholarships are be like, we're giving you $5,000. We'd like you to participate in our scholarship dinner, right? And the requirement is that you participate. That way they have a way to show their funders like, hey, this is the amazing student we selected this year to give $5,000 to, right? The student is here so that we can celebrate them, but also that we can show people who help us make the scholarship a reality that we're doing amazing work, right? And the student is a testament to that. Some scholarships will require you to participate in scholarship dinners and things like that. And in order to maintain eligibility, sometimes you'll have to participate and you might not have the option to opt out. But these are all things that you just have to consider. Scholarships don't always include all of this. Some scholarships are very simple. It's a simple website, doesn't ask you for any sensitive data, so it will never ask you for your social security number, things like that. Asks you for your name, high school, what college are you going to, what grade level are you in, what are you going to major in. It asks you to answer the 3 questions, right? A lot of the simple scholarships that are out there or essay competitions are set up that way. Other scholarships, posse, right? College or university specific scholarships might have interviews, right? Some scholarships might have various amounts of essays that are required. QuestBridge is a very essay heavy scholarship opportunity. It all depends on what they establish, but it's a good thing to know ahead of time the kinds of things that they might ask of you. For example, letters of recommendation. Do you have teachers or adults that you're comfortable and are willing to ask them for their support in writing you a letter? Do you have a resume? If not, there are a lot of templates online for high school student resumes. And you don't have to have necessarily had a job to be able to start filling out a resume, right? On your resume, you can talk about the fact that you are a babysitter, right? That you take care of siblings or younger relatives, that you help translate in your church or for your family. These are all informal leadership opportunities that you're participating in. You could talk about things that you're involved in school, like Maybe you're a part of band, orchestra. Maybe you're a part of Hope, DECA, Beta, National Honor Society. Maybe you're a part of art club, things that you're participating within your school. Maybe you're a part of a church or a synagogue, a temple, and you're a part of the choir, a youth group. Maybe you are an usher of some sort. You participate in your community, right? Things that you're actively doing, things that showcase what you do both academically and outside of school are all amazing things that you can add in a resume and slowly start piecing together a component of some scholarships, right? Others might ask you to do interviews. And if you've never done an interview, that's completely fine. There's actually a lot of resources online, both that are made to be student friendly to help you prepare for an interview. But we're also always here to be able to help you with mock interviews and like give you tips on delivery, content, how you respond to things and things like that. But for the most part, you just need to understand what you're walking into when you're looking for scholarships. When we're talking about our undocumented students or students who are DACA recipients, we're going to really emphasize that you focus your energy on colleges and universities that are a lot more likely to offer you admissions and offer you very hefty financial aid packages. These tend to be private institutions. This does not mean that you cannot and should not apply to private, public, let me rewind, correct myself, public, state, colleges, universities. It doesn't mean you don't have to or you shouldn't. It just means make sure that when you're building your college list, you include private institutions and add a variety of institutions to your list. That way you're able to have a better pool of colleges that you can compare financial aid award letters and end up choosing a college that is better positioned to help you financially. In Georgia, at the very least, that could be like Berry College, Agnes Scott, Emory, Oglethorpe University, right? These are just examples of private institutions. Consider community colleges, even though they may classify you as an out-of-state student, that out-of-state tuition rate might be significantly less than the out-of-state tuition rate at a public institution. And it might mean that you'd have to find scholarships to cover that, be a part-time student, enter into a payment plan. But by starting at private or community colleges, you can keep the momentum going, right? And that way, if you really want to start with your higher education after high school, you don't have to wait too long, right? Ultimately, make sure if you're an undocumented student, a DACA recipient, or immigrant student of any immigration background, that you explore external scholarships that do not require US citizenship, any information on your immigration status, or that are specific to the immigration status that you hold. Specifically, if you're in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, even technically Tennessee, our states are not the most friendly to immigrant students, specifically undocumented students or DACA recipients. They're not always set up to help you make college and university an attainable dream for you, but it's not impossible, right? We just have to make a lot of intentional decisions, you as a student and me as a person here who works at Hope, who helps support immigrant students. We have to make intentional decisions. That way you are being set up for success with whatever is available in your state. And if you're ever open to the idea, traveling out of state to continue your education after high school, you might find that other states and other colleges and universities across the US are a lot better positioned to offer you full tuition, full ride opportunities to make your dreams a reality. It all just depends on what you're open to exploring, what you're interested in pursuing, right? And how much time and energy you invest in exploring these resources and opportunities and setting yourself up for success. One of the things that I've done with my amazing team of volunteers, specifically for our undocumented students and DACA recipients, we've created a list of resources for you. If you scan the QR code on the screen or type in the brief URL, which is bit.ly/3R0YNWS, that link should take you to both an English and Spanish version of this PDF. It is printable. If you have a printer, you can share it to your teachers, counselors, see if they can print it out for you. Like I mentioned, it's in English and Spanish. It's not a resource. It does not include resources that our organization has necessarily created ourselves, but it's a quick access page for you to access resources that are already created by other amazing organizations that are specifically positioned to support immigrant students. So this includes guides on college admissions, financial aid, scholarships, other pathways after high school. If you want to go immediately into the workforce, if you want to go to the trade school, explore an apprenticeship and get a certification in a particular career, If you do want to go to college or university, it has scholarship opportunities and search engines to help you specifically find opportunities available to you. This way, you have access to information that helps you break down obstacles and barriers that otherwise may have been in your way and made things a bit inconvenient. We don't have the capacity right now to do this for everyone of different immigration status, but one of the things that I am able to do with our team of volunteers is actually meet with you. So while you might not have this easy to look at one-page guide, I'm always down to meet with students, regardless of your immigration status, regardless if you want to have a conversation in English or Spanish, and I can just walk you through what your experience could be and things that you specifically might need to consider as you're going through this whole process. Specifically when it comes to scholarships, one of the things that we'll be doing this semester is actually hosting a program called Securing the Bag. It's a scholarship presentation. I'll cover everything that I did today in a lot more detail and with a couple more examples of opportunities that are amazing for Hispanic and Latino students, especially our immigrant students, regardless of whether you've already graduated from high school or you're a recent graduate. Okay, I'm about to finish, folks. So we've covered federal, state aid, institutional, and external scholarship grants and scholarships. Something that is available to you all also are tuition reimbursement programs. Tuition reimbursement programs are typically an employee benefit that a lot of major companies are able to offer their employees. As long as you meet any expectations or requirements, what companies are able to do is pay you back whatever you pay into your college education. Things that you just need to consider is that they typically have very specific policies on how much they can reimburse you, what colleges, universities you can be enrolled in order for them to reimburse you, what majors or degree programs you're eligible to pursue in order for them to reimburse you. So for example, Walmart might not pay for you to go pursue a degree in psychology. They might pay for you to go pursue a degree in business management, right? And they'll pay you back maybe upwards of $5,000 depending on how much you put in. That's just a loose example. Every company is going to have their specific policies, but you can actually find a very thorough list online of at least 50 companies that offer tuition reimbursement. A couple of examples are like Amazon, Apple, Best Buy, Bank of America, Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, FedEx, Home Depot, KFC, Marco's Pizza, McDonald's, Starbucks, Walmart, and more. If you are working for them part-time, full-time as a high school student, if you take a gap year or 2 years before you start college or university, you might be able to position yourself to become eligible for this benefit. And as long as you follow the rules that they set in place, you could pursue particular 2-year or 4-year degrees or certificates or diploma programs and begin your higher education, right? Or continue your education with the support of your employer. It's really important with its reimbursement. So you do have to pay for it out of pocket, maybe enter into payment plan, but you will get paid back through your checks what you've put forward for your education. And then lastly, regardless of what college or university you go to, there are other opportunities you can pursue like payment plans. Payment plans, especially if you know that it's a total that you can reasonably pay, you just can't pay up front. For example, if your bill is $5,000 for the year, and you know that you could possibly afford $5,000, you just can't afford it before the deadline to pay the bill, you can enter into a payment plan with the college. They have specific rules, specific plans and policies, but you can spread out those payments so it's doable for you and your family. This is specifically important if you are in the process of applying to scholarships and you believe that you're likely to get a couple more scholarships before the end of the academic year. Do this if it's reasonable and feasible for you. Enter into payment plan, keep applying to scholarships. Whenever you get awarded scholarships, you can help reduce the total amount you owe through payment plans. Some students might be eligible for private loans. Specifically, if your parents have a social security number, they can help you take out private loans. I do not encourage you to do so. Private loans are very tricky. They have their own payment plans, interest rates, and things like that. It's a lot more complicated than the loans that you would take out from the federal government because every company sets their own rules on things. And it's really not encouraged for you to take out over $10,000 in loans every academic year, especially if your total amount of loans for the time that you graduate significantly outnumbers how much you could possibly earn in your first year in a particular career. So let's say whatever your career is, maybe your first year income or salary in that metaphorical career, right, is $90,000. You don't want to have over $90,000 in debt. if your metaphorical or potential salary your first year after college is 65K, you don't want over 65K in loans. You don't even want really half of that. Private loans are always an option. It's always there. It's a decision for you and your family to make. It's sadly not an opportunity available to students whose parents are undocumented, unless they have like co-signers from a relative who does have a social security number and a good credit score. And then lastly, there's the 529 savings account, which you might have or you might not have. It depends on how your parents, legal guardians, or older relatives have invested money. But some families are fortunate enough to have 529 savings accounts, which are their savings accounts specifically to help cover the cost of college education. So if you're in middle school, if you're in early high school, it's possible for you and your family to start a 529 savings account for you or for a sibling. This helps invest money, increase money based off of like how much you invest, right? So by the time that you or your siblings are in college, you have some money to pull from. This is ideal if you're younger and you still have quite a bit of time before you go to college, university. If you're a senior who's about to enter college next year, a 529 savings account would not be feasible or logical, really. But payment plans and private loans are something that you can explore. Here at Hope and at the consulate, we don't have the capacity to provide you assistance when pursuing private loans. The best I can do is explain to you things that you might encounter as you explore, like explaining interest rates and payment plans. But we leave that completely up to you and would encourage you to actually reach out to financial experts who can help you and your family make wise decisions for your household. Okay, now I promise to wrap things up. If anyone has any questions or concerns, please feel free to drop a comment in the chat. I will make it so that you are able to unmute yourself. Just please go one at a time. But thank you all for joining us at this event. I will stop recording in a second. Okay.